Hello, listeners, and welcome to this week's episode of the Cult Vault. Today we are going to be diving into the world of the armed forces with an introduction into the US Marine Corps and some of the high control methods seen within the recruitment and basic training of this particular branch of the US military. But before we get started, as usual, we have lots of business. First of all, a huge welcome to my newest patron, Christy, long-time listener and fan of the show. I'm so thankful for your support, and I really hope you enjoy the exclusive content and perks of being a patron, one of which is a 15% discount on all merchandise, which is now available on the Cult Vault shop, which just launched this week. I am so excited to finally bring you the news that you can buy podcast merchandise from my website. It has taken a lot of time and I've had a lot of help from friends, but you can now order hoodies, t-shirts, mugs, stickers and bookmarks with loads more things on the way. Patrons automatically get a 15% discount, and I want to give a shout out to my very first customer, Chris, as well as Eden, Ethan, John and Donna, who have ordered from the shop, and a huge shout out to patrons Jacqueline and Heather, who have also ordered from the Cult Vault shop. I hope you all enjoy showing off your Cult Vault swag to the world. To find the shop, you can visit cultvaultpodcast.com/shop or check out the link in the episode description. On my website, you can also find a link to the Ally Awards, annual awards that I have set up this year to celebrate the people who take care of us during difficult times. To celebrate your ally, simply go to my website, cultvaultpodcast.com, and fill in the simple form to nominate your ally in the awards, with the winner receiving a personalised glass trophy. The awards nominations close at the end of March. Now that it is 2022, this means that CrimeCon UK, which is partnered with CBS Reality, is just around the corner. Come and meet your favourite podcasters in June 2022 and watch their live shows, learn forensic skills in workshops such as fingerprint dusting and collecting shoe prints, listen to panel talks by your favourite documentarians and private detectives, and then join us all in the hotel bar where everyone gets together to socialise and discuss shared interests. I will be at the event spreading awareness on ethical coverage of true crime topics and how to spot cults. You can get a 10% discount on all ticket prices right now by using the word cult at the checkout, or follow the link in the episode description. Patrons can receive a 15% discount by messaging me for a special code. All tickets purchased using this code help to support the show, as well as any patrons who sign up from as little as £1 a month at patreon.com/thecultvault, or again follow the link in the episode description. Don't forget that you can still be in with a chance of winning copies of both of Zach Bonnie's books, Dead, Insane or in Jail and Overwritten, by liking, following and commenting on social media content across January. You can find me on Instagram and Twitter at cultvaultpod. Sorry this has been a long introduction, it's been very long-winded with lots of website links and information, but now we're on to the show. Ryan is here to tell us about his introduction into, time in and journey out of the United States Marine Corps. Here is Ryan. Hello Ryan, and thank you so much for agreeing to come and chat with me today. I'm looking forward to bringing this first coverage on the podcast into the military and the armed services and the control methods that are often talked about being used in some of these environments. So would you like to start by introducing yourself to the listeners?
Sure. My name's Ryan. I served in the United States Marine Corps from 2002 to 2004. I spent 3 years in Okinawa, Japan, with the 12th Marines, and I'm just here to kind of give you an idea of how the Marine Corps is and some of the behaviors that we engage in.
Absolutely. And from some of the stuff that we've just discussed then before hitting record has me really excited to explore this new space that we haven't gone into in the podcast yet. But let's start at the beginning. Give us a little bit of a brief history of what your life was like growing up. Sort of where did you grow up? What do you have siblings? What about school? All of those nice things about your life before you joined the military.
Oh, sure. I grew up in Central Florida. It's down south. Super hot. I had both my parents. I'm the eldest of three children. I got two sisters. Growing up, unfortunately, my mom passed when she took her own life when I was 7. But a year later, my stepmom came in, and she was basically, my mom from that point in. So that was awesome. Went to school at the local high school. I'm trying not to give away too much information, but I was in our OTC, which is our basically a reserve officer training corps. It's run by the military in the high schools. It's a leadership education training. So you learn a lot about whichever branch is at that school, and at that point, it was an Army or OTC. And I did fairly well there. And pretty much ever since I was 6, I knew I was going to join the Marine Corps because I met my uncle around that time, and he was a gunnery sergeant in the Marine Corps. And I was just like, I want to be like him because he's the coolest man I've ever met. And not even 2 weeks after I had graduated high school, I was off to boot camp.
Oh my goodness. So yeah, pretty soon after finishing that education, you were on your way.
Absolutely. I pretty much knew what I wanted. My mom signed the papers when I was 17 to go into what they called the delayed entry program. So I had everything signed, all the T's crossed, I's dotted, even before I had graduated high school.
You described your uncle as being like really cool, and he was the person that inspired you to want to join the Marines from such a young age. What do you think it was that stood out about your uncle in terms of you kind of finding him somebody to look up to?
I can't really pinpoint like one thing. It was because we never got to see him a lot because he lived way up north. So we only saw him every so often when our family was able to make the way up there, or they happened to come down south. But just every time I met him, he was just like the cool uncle who would always hang out with you. He'd here's $20 for no reason, and here let's go do this or do that. Let's go ride in the Jeep to go off-roading or something. It was just the cool uncle. And I guess since almost every time I met him, he was coming home and he was in the uniform, the Marine Corps, the greens and the tans, and I was like, man, that's the awesome uniform. My uncle's so cool, man. I want to join him.
The ROTC in your school, that was something you knew you were going to join as well before you were old enough to become a part of that?
Yeah, I'd actually my first year in high school, they had put me in physical education, even though I requested ROTC. So I actually had to go to our the guidance counselors and tell them I want a schedule change next year for ROTC. So I actually ended up getting in a year late. I got pretty high in the ranks just because it was something I wanted to do, and I also knew if you go into ROTC and get a certain amount of years, I knew that coming out of boot camp, I would actually have a higher rank coming out of boot camp because it's a leadership thing that kind of meshes with the military, and you can get a little bit of a benefit from it.
So it would be kind of like, there's a few programs over here that people can do. There's like the Duke of Edinburgh Award, which looks really good on your CV when you apply for jobs and things like that. So, and often there are courses you can take that can add to your UCAS points, which is the system used for your entry into university over here. So would you say that that's kind of something similar? If you translated it into the Marines, you would join the Marines already with some credits in your pocket?
Yeah.
Sort of thing.
Yeah, essentially that sounds like in spirit of what they're trying to do. It's essentially the same. Yeah. Since I already had some years of leadership training in high school, that transferred over to my military career, which gave me like one, instead of coming out as a private, I was a PFC, private first class.
Right. I'm just making a note of all of these because this is definitely something that I think for me, I would like to understand better as we go through. So the ROTC there's already ranks involved in this high school training before you go into the official Marines, you already have this rank system to get used to. I guess that makes sense because you are going, if you aspire to join the Marine Corps, then you have already had that, you've had that mindset and experience of being involved in a rank system. It's just strange for me because I don't know what those ranks are and how they work. So in the ROTC, what types of ranks were there? How did you move up? And what did each rank mean for each individual?
Okay. Each school, depending on where they are, will have a different branch overseeing their ROTC. So you may have a school with a Marine Corps branch, you may have a school with an Army branch, or Navy, what have you, Air Force. The school I was at actually had Army ROTC, so the ranks are slightly different from the Marine Corps, whereas they have they have 2 privates, then private first class, whereas the Marine Corps, we have private first class, Lance Corporal.
Right.
And then on the Army, they have, when you hit E4, you become a specialist or a corporal. A specialist focuses more on their job, where a corporal is more of a people leader. In the Marine Corps, we only have corporals. We don't do the splitting of the specialists.
After private and private first class, then Lance Corporal, and then how many more ranks are there above that position?
About 9.
Oh my goodness. Okay, so a lot.
So I should say there's a total of 9, but they split at certain points, so you get more than that. For example, okay, so the NATO reporting for ranks, for us at least, is E1 through 9. So, for example, a private would be an E1.
Okay.
Private first class, E2. Lance Corporal, E3. Corporal, E4. And it goes up. Once you get to about E8, they split. And we'll have first sergeants and master sergeants. And then E9, that split continues because it's similar to the specialist role I was telling you about. One side sticks with their job and is a technical master, and the other is a leader.
Right. Yes. And I can kind of see how that translates almost into the medical world, where you have people that can practice medicine, and then it gets more specific as you kind of go up, and then you want to specifically only be like an eye doctor. And then there's lots of specific training that would come along with that. That's a strange example that I've just kind of pulled out of thin air. But I can kind of see how, all right, okay, that breaks it down a little bit. It was a little bit kind of when you said, there's about 9 more. I was thinking, oh my goodness.
And that's just for enlisted, because then you have officer ranks as well, and they don't do the split, but there's another like 10 of those, including general officers.
Something that I found quite interesting that you said earlier about why you decided and how you knew so early on that you wanted to join the Marines. Is it okay to say the Marines, or should I always say the Marine Corps?
For that, that's fine. No one, the Marines, Marine Corps, it's good. Both are acceptable.
Okay. So when you knew that you wanted to join the Marines, I was going to ask if it was an influence from your parents, because a lot of the time, from my own, from what I've seen of American families, it's often presented to us over here in England, sort of through TV shows and reality TV and movies, that children may decide to join the armed forces, the Army, the Navy, the Marine Corps, if they've had a family member involved, sometimes a parent. And then I think there's terms for people who grow up with Army parents. Is Army brat? Is that the right expression?
Yeah, a lot of times, whatever branch brat is, what people use, Marine Corps brat, Army brat, Navy brat, Air Force brat. So you'll hear that a lot. And generally, Military service does flow along family lines. It's one of those things, my dad was in the military. My dad's dad was in the, whatever branch. Sometimes people just go into the branch because, their family's done it for like ages. But no, in my particular family, my grandfather was in the Army Signal Corps for a short time. And my uncle, who is who married into our family, was in the Marine Corps. But that's pretty much it as far as I know within my family previous to me.
And a lot of the time over in England, there was a big rebranding of joining the Army Reserves or joining the Army or join the Navy or join the Armed Forces, like a really big campaign shift, because I feel like there was this stigma attached with joining the military. It was something that it was often somebody's last option if they failed in school, or if they didn't get the grades that they needed, or if they didn't know where they wanted to go with their career. And a lot of the time it was often seen as though it was those people that would be targeted by recruiters to go and join the military. Over here, I'm not sure what it would have been like over where you are. And then there was this big campaign shift and loads of new marketing about how you can decide to have this as your career from early on, and these are the perks, and look how cool it is to be part of the military. And anybody that's listening from over in the UK will know what adverts on the telly I'm talking about.
I think I'm familiar with one of them, because I remember there's one, if you can fix a skateboard, you can fix your bike. You can fix a bike, you can fix a car. And it goes on to be, and it goes into at the end, you can fix a warship, and I was like, that's an interesting commercial.
Yep, those are the ones that I'm talking about. Exactly that. So they kind of, I think there was a big shift in going to high schools where different career people would come along and talk about, their work in the industry as a personal assistant or working in hospitality. And then you'd always have the stall that was the Army or the Navy, and why you should come and join the military. So do you remember what the message was for people when you were growing up, in terms of whether it was just a career to fall back on, or whether it was something that a lot of people aspired to be a part of? Because I know that the culture around the military is very different in America than maybe most other places in the world.
Yeah. Oh, well, when I joined, it was, 2002. So it was post 9/11. So the recruiting effort was definitely in high gear. I know, approaching that, it wasn't the same. I remember Marine Corps ads where it was a guy fighting a lava monster, and the Army had their new, be all you can be. I think now they're Army of One, something like that. But going into it, before that, there's always it had always seemed like there was always the it's not a last resort. It can be first resort for depending on who you are. But I think after 9/11, there was definitely a recruiting drive, but I don't think the military has ever been seen as that last resort, kind of like how it is over in the UK and everything like that. Because I definitely know a lot of European countries look down on military service, because I play games and I've got a bunch of friends and stuff who are overseas that I've spoken to about that. And I mean, a lot of them come from countries with conscription, where, they're forced to do stuff and serve their country. And they look down on it even more than, some of the people of my UK buddies. But I would say America's never really had it like that. Coming up to 9/11, it wasn't seen as bad, but it was definitely something you could do. And then after 9/11, it's been, military is good to go. You can get knowledge, you can get paid to go to classes, you can get free healthcare and stuff. And since then, there's almost a reverence for the not just the Marine Corps, but the military itself. Because you got all the people, they find out you served, and all of a sudden you're getting thanked for your service, and then you're just like, okay. Yeah.
That is something that I was definitely going to bring up. Another thing that I think comes through some of the media that we have coming to us over here in England. I think the reputation of the military has changed because of those campaigns over here in the UK. But definitely from what you've just said there's a in my opinion, from the things that I've seen, it comes across very patriotic and very country, like proud,
almost nationalist.
Yes, it's very strange because you always see people saying that, thank you for your service, and I understand that comment to people as well. It's just, the whole thing's just it's very we don't have that over here, so it's strange to see when you see it on the telly and stuff over here. It's strange.
I can tell you that we, as veterans, we react to it differently. Personally, it makes me uncomfortable. I'm just for me, it's just like I joined, I did my service. It was a job. So you don't. I mean, there's a joke about thanking the bus driver when you get off the bus, but I mean, I don't sit there and thank my waiter and waitress for their service. So it's kind of one of those things. I was just doing a job.
A lot of the time when people go on to join high demand control groups, it's because of some trauma that they've experienced in their life and some difficulties or transitional periods that they've been through. And you said that your decision to join the Marines came from meeting your uncle and spending time with him and seeing him in the way he was. And I was wondering if you feel like any of your decision to join the Marines came down to you losing your mum at such a young age.
I never really thought about it. It very well could be a possibility. One thing my stepmother brought up to me when I was growing up is that she always felt I was somewhat aloof from other people, and she felt that kind of might have factored into me choosing to go into the military, just because maybe I was looking for that kind of belonging. But I don't know. I've never talked to a professional about that. And I don't know, my mom she's pretty insightful, so she might have something going there.
Yeah, she sounds wise. She sounds like she's taken a good step back and watched you closely, which is, it's always interesting when people have those small little bits of wisdom and you think to yourself, where has that come from? And how long have you been watching me to make kind of that assumption? But it's kind of nice to know that you have those people in your life as well, because I feel like for somebody to watch you that closely or understand you that deeply, they have to have a certain level of care and a certain level of time for you as well. So it's always nice to know that we have those allies. And
yes,
you mentioned that you joined in the Marines in 2002, and 9/11 happened in 2001.
Correct.
And then later that year, that was when, and correct me if this is wrong, but I think later that year was when America first went into Afghanistan. Is that right?
I believe so. I think it was late 2001, early 2002.
So I just I'm thinking it was after
October
9/11 happened. Right. Okay. So 9/11, the events must have completely, I remember where I was, and I was only young, so I can imagine that you remember exactly where you were when that happened.
I remember exactly where I was. I was actually in ROTC class, and we were in the middle of a uniform inspection, because they give you the uniforms and everything to wear.
Right.
And so we were in the middle of an inspection, and we were out on one of the basketball courts, and the instructor, who is actually a retired officer from the Army, he came rushing out, and he told me to dismiss everyone, get back to the classrooms. And when we got back to the classroom, the TVs were on, and we were watching news footage of the towers being hit.
Whoa, what was the atmosphere like? And it's kind of giving me goosebumps to think about you sitting there watching that at that exact moment. Yeah. Is it like something you can even comprehend as it's happening, or does it just feel like it's not something that is actually happening at that time?
Considering I didn't have any personal connection to New York at the time, it was more of one of those, like, you're seeing it on the TV. It almost feels like kind of like a bad movie. You're watching this happen, and you're just kind of in disbelief. It's like, this couldn't have, did this really happen? And basically the entire class is just shocked. It was silent, trying to glean as much information as we could from that TV.
And you're about 16 at this time?
17, I believe it was. Yeah, 17, because I turned 18 just before I graduated and left.
Right. And you already know that you're going to join the Marine Corps. So does this then, after the initial events of 9/11, does this start to then weigh in or have an impact on your chosen career path?
Not really, because that was something I kind of factored in a long time ago. I understood, if I joined the military, Marine Corps, Army, what have you, I understood there was the possibility I could get sent to combat. I mean, that's kind of the point of the military. So I kind of had that conversation with my, 17-year-old self at that time, that, it's a possibility I might get sent somewhere and I might have to, go into combat. So having already had that discussion, once 9/11 happened, it didn't really change anything.
Sometimes I assume that people that join the Marines all go into combat, but obviously that's not the case, because you have to have like human resource departments, I'm guessing, and people that handle like all the organizational and day-to-day stuff and and all of that. Right. So did you know when you were going into the Marines that you were going to be doing something that wasn't combat related, or did you go into the Marines expecting to be sent to combat, to be doing combat related things?
So my mom kind of prevented that, because originally when I was joining, I wanted to be a tanker. I wanted to drive tanks.
Okay.
I thought that was gonna be the coolest thing. I'll be driving tanks. But my mom, she waggled her, finger in front of me and was like, "No, you need to get a job that'll help you once you leave the military." So I got suckered by the Marine Corps because they had a job, command and control electrician. I was like, that sounds awesome. I'm going to learn some electrical stuff. I'm going to, maybe I'll be wiring up, cool top secret buildings or something, blah, blah, blah. Nah, I was a generator operator. But no, I wanted to go into combat arms, but I let my mom kind of steer me. But one of the ethoses of the Marine Corps is every Marine is a rifle, no matter what your job. Every Marine knows how to handle a rifle and knows a little bit about squad tactics. So if they need to like grab you from your platoon to augment a patrol or something, you won't be completely out of your element.
I guess this is where we get into that initial introduction of your time in the Marines by asking if basic training is the same for every person that enrolls.
Yeah. The first boot camp you go to, everyone goes to it. I mean, except for officers and stuff, they got their own officer candidacy school, and that's a whole different can of worms. But
okay.
Yeah. So the boot camps, there's two of them, one in Paris Island and the other in San Diego. So depending on which side of the U.S. you live on, you'll be sent to the left or the right coast. all female Marines are trained at Paris Island, but I think I've heard that they're starting to train them in San Diego now. But I I haven't followed that, so I can't confirm it. But yeah, all female Marines went to Paris Island. I went to Paris Island, and every Marine, or at least every enlisted Marine, goes through boot camp, 13 weeks. And
okay. So you've just turned 18 at the time you graduate high school.
Mm-hmm.
You have already enlisted in the Marines. What's the process like to join? Is it just some paperwork and then you're accepted? Is there like a vetting process and you have to meet somebody and go for like an interview? How does that stage work before you go over to actually take part in these 13 weeks?
All right, but okay. So the process before you get to boot camp is, of course, you go see a recruiter, and you're going to fill out all sorts of paperwork. You're going to take what they call an ASVAB, which is the Armed Services Vocational Aptitude Battery. So it's basically a big old IQ test that tests like not just school knowledge, but like practical knowledge for like, mechanical, electrical, things like that. They're trying to figure out what skills do you have that would be good for the military. And they basically, at the end of it, give you a score. And if your score is high enough, you might rate to, do this job, you might rate to do that job. So
right. And how high or low is the bar to be accepted in general? And do you remember what kind of score you got in terms of like really good or really bad?
I don't know the lower cutoff. I know I think it goes up to 100 because I've heard of people getting like 90s and stuff on it. We do have a term for people who score low, which is ASVAB waiver, where they had to get a waiver to, basically, discount the ASVAB. If I remember correctly, I got a 62. So I was a little above average, which allowed me to get a job, doing the generator stuff.
And after you have this test, this like aptitude test, and then you get your score and you are accepted, do you know what role you're going into and what you'll be training for after these 13 weeks?
Sometimes. You do have the ability to try and pick your job, and assuming there's a need to fill roles in that job, you may be able to do that. But you basically give them a tiered list. This will be my first choice, second choice, third choice, et cetera. And, if it turns out, we got too many people in that job, knock you down to your second choice. And then some people go on what they call just open, and they'll just stick them wherever. So there's the option. If you don't want to choose, they'll just.
I'd be so worried just not knowing where I was going to be going, what I was going to be doing. If they had imagine if they didn't have like your first, second or third choice. And then you're thinking, well, if they don't have any openings in any of those three, then I could be doing absolutely anything at all, within my score sheet,
right.
That I'm kind of allowed to do depending on how well I'd done or however that part works. I'd be that's too, I don't know, leaving my fate in other people's hands too much. I think maybe I'm not sure, but I suppose people know what they've signed up for at that point when they they go.
It takes a special person to go open contract. That is definitely. I wasn't going to do that. I gave them my choices, and my first choice was electrician. After my mom scolded me, and that's where they sent me. But once you've basically done all the paperwork and kind of decided what job you might possibly get, they send you what's called MEPS, Military Entrance Processing Station. And this is where they do all the physicals to you. They make you do jumping jacks and bend over and cough, all that good stuff. And once they've cleared you physically, they send you back to your recruiter, and they basically give you a date. This is when you're going to boot camp.
Okay.
For me, I didn't get very lucky, so they had no flights. So I got to drive on a one of those white passenger vans for 10 hours to
Oh
South
my
Carolina from
goodness.
Florida. So
Okay.
I got 10 hours of sitting on a bus, like going, oh my goodness, what have I done?
How long did you have to wait before, like, receiving your starting date and actually going? Like, what was the time difference? Was it a long time to wait, or was it relatively soon after your graduation?
Well, for me, it was a long time because remember, I was in that delayed entry program. So I had everything done like way ahead of time. So
Mm-hmm.
I knew for a fact, like even before my graduation, I knew, 2 weeks later I'm going to be on the bus.
So you're 18. Well, you're 17 when 9/11 happens, but you already know that you're going to join the Marines. So when you turn 18 and you graduate, you then go for your test, you score just above average, you fill in a few things that you would
Well,
like to do.
Timeline's a little off there. I actually took my test in school because
Right. Okay.
yeah,
Okay.
yeah, they actually set up the test that our entire high school could go take it.
No
You know,
way. Oh my
yeah,
goodness. As like a recruitment drive for the entire
kind of, yeah. I have a feeling that it was kind of one of those. Let's see who might have some high scores. So
No
yeah,
way. Like, who
yeah. So
doesn't like want to take a test to see how good they are at something as well? Like,
of course,
especially if it's not going to impact your education in any way. Just like come and
yeah, right.
see if you're really good at this thing or really good at this thing. And it doesn't impact anything other than maybe our interest in you.
Pretty much.
That's so interesting. I'm just trying to picture like if I was in school and that would have happened with us, like a group come in and say, come and take this test. And the whole school, it reminds me of when we all had to go and have vaccinations against something, and we all had to line up, and the whole like the line for the school went all the way around all the corridors. It was like a big
Right.
snake of people just going through this like
Yeah, just imagine a cafeteria just packed full of kids all taking the same test.
wow. Okay. So
Yeah.
so right, let me go back. So you're in school, you witness the events of 9/11 on the television, you take your test before you graduate, so you have your results, your mum signed the waiver when you're 17.
Yep.
At 18 you graduate, you already know you're going off to the Marines, and you get your date. You have to sit in this van because there are no flights available
Yep.
for 10 hours to arrive at basic training. Do you know what boot camp is going to be like at this point? Have you heard stories? Have you done any research? Have you been given any information from the Marines themselves on like what the process looks like for 13 weeks?
Yeah, we were pretty much just given a list of don't take this stuff with you.
Okay.
Because there's certain contraband not allowed at boot camp, so they're like don't take this stuff.
Okay.
And they don't really, I mean, you can ask, but it was at that time it was pretty simple to find information. And of course, I just called up my uncle and was like, "Hey, how was boot camp?" Granted, he was telling me about boot camp way back in like the 80s, so it was a bit different.
Do you think that your uncle was, I don't know what the right expression is. Over here, we would say like quite laddie, in the sense that he really liked basic training and it was like some of the best times of his life, and the camaraderie and everything was really good? Or was he kind of just like, oh yeah, boot camp is boot camp?
No, he was he pretty much told it pretty black and white. It's like there are parts you're gonna hate, but there's parts you're gonna enjoy. So I mean, it really depends on how you take it. The entire point of it is to break you down and build you up. So don't take anything anyone tells you to heart. Just keep pushing on and get to that graduation day.
Right. So he had some pearls of wisdom for you going into boot camp. Yeah. So he had some insight into what it could be like for a young man going into the military in the early 2000s, even though he'd been quite a while before that.
Right.
Okay. Right. So sorry, I keep cutting you off. So sorry. So
no worries.
So you arrive, you're
We
told
yep.
what
So,
you're not allowed to have. So I'm guessing that you have your bags checked and everything.
there's not. They do check your bags for contraband. They give you a option to. Well, first, let me tell you what it's like when you arrive to Paris Island.
Yes, please. Yes, please.
Okay, so anyone who's familiar with the Marine Corps is going to understand what I'm about to tell you. Is basically the first thing that happens is when that bus pulls up, the drill instructor comes out these doors that are to the right of the vehicle. He comes right up to the door, just whips it open as hard as he can, pretty much, and just starts yelling, "Get off my bus! Get off my bus right now!" And you start moving. And outside, in front of the receiving hall, are these yellow footprints, and you go, get on my footprints right now. So you're immediately, boom, you get on these footprints, and they get you pretty much set up in like a platoon formation. And they welcome to Marine Corps basic training. The first and last words out of your mouth are going to be "sir." They basically give you the spiel, and everything is at like volume 11, and at that point they start bringing you into in processing, and that's when they start checking your bags. You get your initial uniform issue, and you get your initial haircut, which is a buzz cut all the way down, just no hair, and that's when you get to your first platoon. It's basically the first 48 hours is all in processing, paperwork. You don't even get to sleep.
Whoa, okay. So immediately as soon as you're off the bus, you're already kind of being told to walk on these footprints, which keeps you all tidy and neat and in a line.
Well, they're footprints on the ground in what's called a platoon formation. So basically, like lines facing like one direction. You'll have like a line of, say, 6 footprints, then a line behind them of 6, a line behind them of 6, and everyone gets on these footprints facing the same direction.
And you're immediately being yelled at as well.
Immediately.
Before you. So there's no like, "Oh, welcome to Paris Island," here, as you can see. I mean, I know that that's what we see in media, television, and film. I don't know if it's a good example to use, but I've watched Full Metal Jacket, and I've seen the shouting and Private Pile and a jelly donut and all of that, but sometimes
jelly donut, yeah,
absolutely, and you feel like that's exaggerated and that can't actually be how things happen. But from what you said there, that's the kind of feeling I'm getting. Like you get off the bus and it just hits you. There's no chance for you to like acclimatize to your new environment. You're just thrusted into this situation
it's one of those things. It's almost immediately they're trying to get into you an instant and willing obedience to command. Basically, straight off, right off the bus. Here's your commands. Do it.
And when everybody has to have a buzz cut, is that the women included?
No, the females do get to keep their hair, although they do have to keep them within a certain regulation. They got to keep them in a neat bun, like right at the back base of the skull. They can't have any loose like flyaways, or the hair can't be like kind of like loose. It all has to be in this bun. So a lot of them tend to cut their hair short.
And you are going to be here for 13 weeks. So your first 48 hours is
in processing.
No sleep. Why are you not allowed to sleep during this time?
I think it's more of I'm not quite sure of the reasoning behind the not sleeping. But I don't know. I've never really found a good explanation for it. Granted, I didn't really look into it. I wouldn't be surprised if it has something to do with when they drop you to your actual drill instructors. Because the first drill instructor you meet, he's not going to be with you. He's just there for in processing.
Okay.
Yeah. So it might be just one of those things that they just want you so dead tired that the night before they drop you to your actual drill instructors, that you actually just basically go down for exhaustion, and you're not just sitting there like, oh, my drill instructors, scary.
So basically like a big breaking of will exercise.
Kind of. Granted, for some people it takes a little bit more than that. But yeah, it's all in processing. You get so many vaccinations. It's ridiculous. And you get your first issue of uniform and equipment. They issue you your rifle, which is going to be your new best friend. And then you start your 13 weeks.
Had you ever held a firearm before this moment?
Oh, plenty of times. In fact, my school, while we did have a shooting team, it was air rifles, but I've gone to plenty of firing ranges before. Our local town had a rifle qualification and stuff that was done through our ROTC. So we were firing like old M1 Garands from like World War II era and stuff like that. So
I know the name of that gun from playing Call of Duty World at War, but otherwise would have had no idea what you were talking about. And I guess it's a good thing that you were comfortable, or at least familiar in some ways with firearms, because when I went over to visit friends over in New Jersey and somebody handed me their handgun, because we don't have, I mean, it probably even sounds naive saying handgun because I don't know exactly what kind of firearm it was, but we don't have legal firearms over here in England. So when I was handed this piece, I say in air quotes because I don't really understand firearms. But
it's understandable.
Piece of equipment, piece. I don't. So I was handed this piece, and I just didn't know what to do with it. It was so much heavier than I thought it would be. I felt so extremely uncomfortable that the next time I went over, I said to my friend, who I like to visit yearly when we don't have pandemics and such, I said to her, if we're going to go and visit our friend that loves the firearms, I would like to go to a firing range beforehand because it makes me really uncomfortable. And I'd like to go to a safe environment where everything is controlled and I can handle the equipment with trained professionals who need certifications and licenses and stuff to legally be able to have these establishments. So we did that. We went to a firing range. It was like really fun. And maybe because it was so controlled and I like it when I understand, how everything works, and they, the instructors talked us through how everything works and how to be safe and how to be controlled. And then later on that night, a friend of ours had a bit too much to drink and brought another firearm out with some ammo, and then dropped some of the bullets around a campfire. So I was like, I'm never, ever, ever coming back here again. I am so stressed.
Wow.
Like, I took every precaution that I could to make myself as comfortable around this person who was like pro guns, by going to the firing range and being familiar with firearms and thinking, right, if he's going to have them in the house, this is how I make myself comfortable with them, understand how they work, appreciate why he might like to keep firearms and all of these things. And then he just went and did that. And I was like, how irresponsible is that? So obviously by this point, you've had these interactions and experience with your rifles. So how to appreciate the significance of the firearm and what it's capable of and how to treat it with respect. I grew up on the coast, so from a very, very, very early age, we had to learn why the sea was dangerous, why we need to respect the sea. And so even when we were 8, 9, 10 and being left alone on the beach, we were always like, only swim within the flags, the lifeguard flags, never go outside of the lifeguard flags, never go into the water when there's sandbanks in the water because they disappear so quickly in the tide. So we were always very aware of how to be respectful of the sea and how dangerous it was. And I imagine when you are introduced to firearms certain ages, if you are introduced to them under the right circumstances, you understand and are taught pretty quickly how to respect them and how dangerous they can be and why they need to be used only in certain situations and all of those things. Is that a correct assumption to make?
Yes, definitely so. In fact, there's 4 rules that the Marine Corps smashes into your head, but any responsible gun owner pretty much follows the 4 safety rules. Is 1, treat every weapon as if it's loaded, which makes sense, right? Keep your weapon safe until you're ready to fire. Keep your finger straight and off the trigger until you're ready to fire, and never point your weapon at anything you do not want to destroy. So that means being aware of your muzzle, where it's pointing, And so basically, if you follow those 4 rules, you can never go wrong.
Mm-hmm. A lot of the statistics, when you look at the anti and pro gun communities in America as well, a lot of the arguments are around accidental shootings in the home. So I guess if you were to follow, first of all, to understand those 4 points thoroughly, because I know a lot of the accidental shootings are with children that don't understand how firearms work. But if you were to understand and comprehend and follow those 4 rules, then it's pretty much fail-safe, really.
Because you'll never do anything stupid, because you'll just assume every weapon is loaded, and you won't ever point it at anything, a person or object or anything that you don't actually want a bullet going through. And then, of course, keeping your finger off the trigger and keeping the weapon safetied. You follow those 4 rules, you can't go wrong.
I was discussing this with my partner earlier, and we were saying how wild it is to imagine being in your home where you have licensed firearms, you have the correct paperwork, you're legally allowed to own those firearms. Right. Somebody breaks into your home and you shoot them dead for trespassing, and that's it. Like, there's no, like, that is just so, I cannot comprehend that as somebody living in a country that doesn't have firearms. That to me blows my mind.
And I could understand that coming like from you being over in the UK. Y'all, as far as I'm aware, have never really had that
we have a lot of knife crime. Yeah,
never had that kind of like right to self-defense and being able to carry a weapon on you.
No, and this I feel comes back to that patriarchal ideology that we were discussing earlier on as well. And it's hard to differentiate that from thank you for your service to I have the right to bear arms, almost. In my kind of experience of US culture.
Yeah, it's kind of a little bit of a difference, because of course the whole 2A thing, I'm sure you're aware of the whole war we had. So in order to gain our independence, our country was founded 17-year-olds who were fighting the British and they were having to use their own firearms to do so. So that's why our founding fathers kind of enshrined that whole ability to hold on to our firearms, just in case. Going back to what you said about someone breaking into your house, I currently live in Florida, which is what we call a castle doctrine state. Your house is your castle, as they put it. So you have the right to defend your castle in any way, shape, or form you feel is fit. I mean, except for booby traps, that's a whole nother legal boondoggle. But yeah, no, it's one of these things. Like, I've always told anyone I've gotten who they've just spoken to me that, hey, I'm looking to maybe get a firearm to protect, my house or carry on me. And it's one of those things I've always told them, you need to have a conversation with yourself. If you have that firearm and you end up having to unholster it or draw it out of your desk or whatever, you need to understand that if you do that, you may be taking a life, and you need to take that. You need to have that conversation with yourself and be ready for the repercussions.
Yep. I knew as soon as you said that you need to have a conversation with yourself, I was thinking, are you prepared or willing to kill another person? Because that's the potential if you are going to carry a live firearm with you or have one in your home.
Yep. And unfortunately, some people don't really have that conversation with themselves and they end up stopping themselves. They might draw the gun. But if the person kind of senses you're not willing to use it, they may attack you and try and take it from you. So it's one of those things. If you're going to carry and you make that decision to draw, you best be ready for whatever comes after it, because it's all going to be your fault.
Wow. Oh my goodness. And I've read things as well about people who have been robbed in their own homes and they've had their own firearms used against them. And I've read things about there being altercations of people's houses being broken into and they've chased the perpetrator out into the front lawn and they shot the perpetrator as the perpetrator was retreating, and then they've been arrested for like manslaughter or crime of passion, even though it was actually in the front yard and not in the home. And all of these really, and we say a lot that on the show when we talk about things in America that laws vary state to state, which makes it confusing when we're talking universally about gun laws and firearms and things. And I know that this episode is not about guns. I think this conversation is important, but it's just interesting for me to gain your perspective on somebody that's been involved in the Marines, who are obviously pro firearms for various different reasons in terms of protecting your own, protecting your country, going out to fulfill missions in other places that are outside of America. But let me pull us back. So you go into your basic training. You spend the first 48 hours in processing. You get no sleep. You're given your rifle, and then you're handed over to your official drill sergeant.
Oh yeah. So yeah, we're caught back up. Then you get dropped, and they do term dropping to your new drill instructors. They will introduce you. They've got a whole drill instructor speech about how they're there to train you and mold you. They'll never put their hands on you if any of them happen to do anything like that. Report them to the nearest other drill instructor, etc. But sometimes during training things happen. But yeah, you get introduced to your new drill instructors, and then you're pretty much on the go again. I mean, your days are packed, whether it's book learning, learning about the history of the Marine Corps, learning your ranks and structures, stuff like that. Rifle range is like its whole 2-week deal in the later part. Learning the rifle manual, how to march with it, how to drill with it. And all of this basically is culminating to break you down and build you up and, learn how the Marine Corps works.
Do you remember your first impressions of your official drill sergeant? Are you able to draw parallels between films and your drill sergeant, or were they different from what you expected?
I was pretty much expecting it. Boot camp for me wasn't as big an ordeal as I think it might have been for other people. During ROTC, they had summer camps, which weren't, not as high intensity as boot camp, but, I got used to the whole sleeping in squad bays with, 20 other, guys, and, using communal showers, moving in a military fashion, moving in formations and stuff. So that it wasn't, I would say it wasn't as big an ordeal for me. Some of the guys in my platoon, they had trouble adjusting.
Could you see some of that from the first 48 hours, or was this as you got more into the boot camp program that you saw them kind of taking the hit?
I think it was more as we progressed, because in the first 48 hours, everyone's still, what's going on? Then you kind of, once you get into your groove and you're kind of doing the training, moving around, doing stuff, you see the people who just aren't, as they say, cutting the mustard. They're just kind of treading water,
Right.
essentially.
The shock wears off and people start to realize that this is where they will be for the next 13 weeks.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, we had this one guy. He was just a turd, and it was one of those things where he ended up getting us. It's called smoked. It's basically a form of like reprimand almost, because they had these sand pits that were bordered by like lumber to hold the sand in, and sometimes if you messed up, you'd go out to these sand pits and get smoked, and they would have you doing like exercises like, I don't know if you've ever heard of mountain climbers. So you kind of go over onto your hands and you bring your knees up to your chest, back and forth, and you're doing that. Then they'll make you jump on your back and start doing like butterfly kicks, and then make you start doing push-ups. But the thing of it is, they don't make you do, a set of these, then do another. They're constantly like, push. So you start pushing, kick, jump on your back, start kicking, push. You gotta keep moving to each exercise as they're telling
Oh my
push,
goodness.
side style hops, start doing jumping jacks, push, and all this movement is to just start like throwing sand up, and it starts getting in your uniform, sweating, and the sand is just like grinding on you, and like, it's sort of a punitive thing. Like if you screw up, you're going to go to the pit. Yeah, going back, this one particular guy kept screwing up and getting us sent to the pit. So it was more of a, the entire platoon being like, you need to shape up,
And again, that comes back to the movie Full Metal Jacket with the soap bars in the pillowcase, because he keeps getting everybody into right. Okay, so it really is like that then.
Yeah, well, I mean, we didn't soap party him. But it was basically one of those, instances of you need to start pulling your weight.
Right. So here we have examples of groupthink, where the group are policing each other as opposed to the drill sergeants. So you're more worried about what the other person next to you is doing, and the group as a whole, instead of the drill sergeants and what they will do to you next, and their reasoning behind certain decisions for you as a group.
Yeah, it got more to we want to get through this without going to the pit, and if you shape up, we don't gotta do that. So it's less worrying about like what the drill instructors like we're less worried about them getting on us. We're more worried about him screwing up, causing them.
Even though he might be struggling with something physically or emotionally, it's difficult for you as a group to focus on that, because you are being physically and psychologically punished for his kind of coming short of certain activities and exercises.
Yeah. Luckily for us, though, there does come a point when they're just like, okay, you're done. And they'll just like drop him. It's like what we call recycling. They'll drop him to the next platoon behind us so he can redo everything. Because it might just be one of those things, he wasn't physically fit enough to keep up, so they drop him back so he can get more training to maybe catch up in that platoon. But they'll recycle Marines, recruits at that point, because you're not a Marine until you finish boot camp.
And do you feel like Marines that are, or recruits that are recycled, then go and have a certain reputation already by the time they join their new group?
That's the thing. If you get to graduation and you cross that parade deck and you get your Eagle Globe and Anchor, you're a Marine. So whether you got recycled, 12 times is irrelevant, kind of. I was gonna say, granted, if people find out you're recycled 12 times, they might kind of give you the side eye and be like, what were you doing?
That was going to be sort of my next follow-up question, and whether you had anybody that was recycled come into your group, and whether you were worried about what that would mean for you as a unit.
No, my platoon got lucky. We didn't get any recycles dropped to us. We dropped that one guy. It was in third phase, so pretty late in training. But no, our platoon didn't pick anyone up like that. So I never got to see what happened. One of our sister platoons did, but of course, we're not close enough in training that I could actually see like what happened there.
So just talk us through, once you've been through processing, or talk us through what the average day and week looks like for somebody that is involved in a Marine Corps boot camp in America.
Okay. In fact, give me 1 second because I am pulling up the training matrix for boot camp. Because it varies by phase and like what week you're in. So generally with the first phases, you're getting things like intro to Marine Corps values. You get introduced to what we call Mcmap, which is Marine Corps martial arts program. It's essentially an amalgamation of different like fighting forms, because one of the things that they teach you is hand-to-hand training. You start learning customs and courtesies. Which ranks do you salute? How do you greet someone? Because we have greetings of the day. If it's before lunch, you greet anyone above you. You want to greet them. For example, if I was passing a staff sergeant, it's before lunch. It's always good morning, get the staff sergeant. If it's after lunch, good afternoon, staff sergeant. If it's after dinner, good evening, staff sergeant. Stuff like that. And of course, if it's an officer, you give the greeting of the day plus saluting, all that good stuff for the customs and courtesies.
Are you in different like uniforms at this point? Because I know that there are different badges for different ranks, but are you supposed to be able to identify those badges immediately, or are there different uniforms so you can see from a distance the rank of the person you are approaching?
Any Marine who's graduated and is not a recruit will have rank. On your collar, you have your chevrons of whatever rank you are. Now, as a boot or a recruit, like in first phase, you tuck your blouse into your pants so they know you're first phase, recruit. When you're in second phase, you get to untuck your blouse out of your trousers, but you don't have boot bands that go over your boots. And then
my goodness,
when you're in third phase, you're basically wearing the uniform, but you don't have the patches that have your name or U.S. Marines. So that's how they know you're a recruit,
right? Okay, so oh my goodness, so is 13 weeks long enough to like identify and understand all of these things?
Oh, you're by the second week, they're expecting you to be able to start identifying ranks.
Oh my goodness. So again, you said there boot/recruit. So there is inside terminology here used to explain certain things.
So boot refers to boot camp,
okay.
Which could also refer to someone who is just getting into the Marine Corps. They're a boot, basically insinuating they're just out of boot camp. And it can also work for someone who has just joined a unit. That guy's a boot.
Okay. Okay.
And it all kind of goes back to boot camp.
Do you feel like the experience for women during boot camp was significantly different for men? I know there's been a big shift recently around the Me Too movement and equality, and a lot around equality for military women. But this is 2002, so I'm wondering if you feel like the experience for women was different for them in the Marine Corps boot camp than it is perhaps today.
I can't really speak much to that because even though the female Marines were in Paris Island and they trained there, they were in their own battalion, which was on the other side of pretty much the island, and it was a rare sighting to see them out training. So unfortunately, I wasn't around them enough to be able to even say if their training at the time was similar. I mean, granted, the Marine Corps is all about, even in 2000 was about, you're going to do the same stuff. So I can imagine it was very similar with certain provisions provided, due to probably biological reasons and stuff like that.
I guess the reason I ask is because of the movement around the whole Vanessa Guillen murder and the mentality shift that has been suggested to military forces over here as well since all of that has happened, because that was 2020, so that was only last year. And a lot of the women that have experienced abuse in these environments have come forward after feeling like they couldn't report the abuse at the time due to the systems in place, within these various different parts of the military. So I guess that was the intention behind my question around women training. But I guess if you didn't see many women during the boot camp phase, then you wouldn't really have much to comment on.
Yeah. Unfortunately, I can't say much personal about that. I do know statistically when the Me Too movement came around, and specifically for like reporting purposes, I do remember like keeping an eye on that. And one of the odd things is between all the branches, the Marine Corps actually had like the most amounts of reports, which from my understanding, could be taken two ways. One, the Marine Corps has a whole lot more, issues, or the Marine Corps is the only one reporting it.
Yes. Yep. And that's exactly what I would have said, that there are two ways to look at it. Yep. And I think you're exactly right there. Or even maybe even a third option is that the Marine Corps is the only part of the US military where people feel comfortable enough to come forward and report those things that have happened. Because we know that if there was a statistic of, say, 15% of women experienced some type of abuse within, let's say, the Navy, that 15% isn't a true number of women that have experienced abuse. That's just the amount of women that have come forward to report that. So the number could well be a lot higher than that. So I guess then what you've said is very insightful in terms of there's either a lot more happening in the Marines, a lot more of it being reported in the Marines, or a lot more women feel comfortable enough to come forward, or a lot more women have taken that brave step to report that has happened, whereas in other parts of the military that might not be the case. And maybe that's due to the way that it's handled. Maybe that is due to there just being a higher number of abuse cases. I guess it would be hard to know, because I'm sure
that would require that would require investigations that I'm unfortunately I don't have the ability to read, and you'd also have to remember the Marine Corps is a much smaller force than either the Army, Navy, so I mean it's one of those things that it could that data in and of itself could be taken so many different ways, and you would definitely need an investigation to figure out what the breakdown is,
And it's interesting that a lot of the times those investigations, when they are put forward, they are self-investigations. So the army investigates itself.
We investigated ourselves and found ourselves free of any wrongdoing.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's it.
Pretty much what they say about the police over here. But.
And so you're in your boot camp, you're in your basic training, you kind of don't really mix with you're on Paris Island, so all of the women that have joined the Marines and going through boot camp are also on Paris Island, but they're kind
Yep.
of away from where you are. And
Right.
you are going through your day to day. If there is somebody that can't keep up and they have proven themselves to not be able to keep up time and time again, then they are recycled in air quotes and sent kind of back down to the newest boot camp recruits.
Yep.
And made to go almost through boot camp and basic training again.
Yep.
So how much sleep do you think you are given on an average night? And what are the sleeping arrangements like for somebody in boot camp?
Okay. I think I'll go in reverse order on that one. So the arrangements are what we refer to as a squad bay. So it's a long open hall that might have stanchion or poles, for structural support. And on either side, if you're looking down the long axis, you're going to have bunk beds just on either side going down the whole length. And, you're going to have a recruit in each bunk, assuming it's a full platoon. It may not be a full platoon, so you might have a few empty racks. And of course, in front of each of those, you have 2 foot lockers, and each Marine each recruit has a foot locker that they keep all their gear in, and their rifles are going to be padlocked to the racks of or to the frame of the bed or the rack. And for sleeping, you're supposed to get 8 hours a night, but that's always, contingent on training.
So first of all, you're expected to learn all the different ranks and how to communicate with people of different ranks. But
Yep.
You've just said there that your rifle is padlocked to your bed. So I'm assuming that you have to understand then and carry out the protocol around the gun safety and the rifle safety and how to and maintain your rifle. And
Yep.
also then are you expected to know and understand how to maintain your living quarters in the same way?
Yep. Every Thursday we have what we call field day. So field day is essentially just a top to bottom cleaning of your living space. And that extends out into what we call to the Fleet Marine Force, which is, the Marine Corps in general. So you got boot camp, and then Fleet Marine Force. And every Thursday you clean your room. Friday morning, you're inspected. And sometimes if you fail the inspection, you could have your liberty secured. And liberty is what we call free time. But of course, in boot camp, you get no liberty. So that's kind of an irrelevant thing there. But if you fail your field day in boot camp, you might end up in the pit.
Wait. So you get no free time during basic training?
You might, depending on the particular holidays. So I went in May. So I was there from May, June, and July. I graduated in August.
The 4th of July, of course. Yeah.
Yeah. So there was 4th of July. They had some fireworks. They basically marched us all out onto the parade deck, had us sit down. They had some fireworks. All right, get up, and marched us back to the barracks. They do give you after you complete the crucible, which we'll get to. You do get Marine Week, and the day before graduation, you get Family Day, where you get a little bit of time to spend with your family before your graduation.
So when you talk about field day being a weekly event,
oh yeah,
the upkeep of your living quarters only happens weekly, or are you inspected daily on how you've made your beds and all of that stuff?
Oh yeah, no. If your rack isn't made the day as it's supposed to be, you're going to get probably put in the pit, or or if they don't send you out to the pit, you're going to go to the quarter deck. And the quarter deck for Navy and the Marine Corps, because again, I don't think I ever said this before. The Marine Corps is part of the Navy, so we have a lot of naval traditions. Okay. So the quarter deck is the part of a ship that people get on and off, and it's kind of ceremonial, right? So the quarter deck and boot camp is where they send you to get basically smoked. So like I told you how they tell you, push, jump, all that stuff in the pit. They'll make you do that on the quarter deck.
Right. So okay. So pit and quarter deck are like two things you don't want to hear in terms of like physical stress on your body.
Yeah, because they're going to basically PT you, physically train you. The pit's the worst just because the sand. It's terrible. Quarter decking is pretty much the same as the pit. You just don't have the sand and it's indoors. But you're going to be, running, jumping, all that good stuff. But for field day, we move all the racks to the center aisle, get what we call scuzz brushes, or stiff bristled brushes with like no handles, and we would actually have to clean the floor by like duck walking and like scrubbing the floor. And we'd have to like clean the baseboards, make sure there's no dust on them, make sure basically no horizontal surfaces had any dust on them.
Wow.
Make sure all the racks were made and tight, because you can make a rack and it'll be loose and you'll still fail. You need to have a tight rack. You need to make sure that your foot locker is locked up. You need to make sure that your rifle is locked up. You need to make sure that we have to clean the head, which is the bathroom. You can't make sure that there's no hairs left anywhere. Make sure that there's like no mold growing or anything like that. I mean, clean everything. Essentially, everything better be able to be eaten off.
Wow. In some situations, it sounds ideal because I love my house to be like that with 2 kids under 2. But at the same time, I feel like those are impossible expectations unless you're in an environment that nurtures that kind of mentality.
I mean, it's one of those things. It's annoying at the time, but you got to remember you've got 60 recruits all working to clean this squad base. So, I mean, many hands makes the work light, but you have to do it every week, and you have to make sure that, you don't miss anything. You don't leave a dust bunny over here. You don't do, because if you fail your inspection, you can bet the drill instructors are probably going to, something's going to happen.
I feel like that is it's a really dangerous way to awaken somebody's OCD as well.
I've known a few Marines who, once they hit the fleet, it was just like, dude, what is up with your room? It was just like, some of them I was like, are you a germaphobe? You have like nothing in here. So, but yeah, no, it was definitely a trip learning field day, and that goes all the way into the fleet Marines too. So you're going to be doing that for your entire enlistment.
And with your racks as well, are you inspected in the morning on a daily basis after you've woken up and got dressed and put on your uniform? Is your uniform inspected? Are your like beds or cots then inspected as well? I'm just drawing off of different sources of media that I've seen in terms of
a typical morning would essentially be you get lights. Essentially all the lights turn on, you hear people, and I forgot to tell you, part of that you might get sleep is we have what's called fire watch posted. There's always going to be 2 recruits who are up, and it's like 2-hour rotation. So you do 2 hours, wake the next recruit up.
Wait. So on some nights you're given duty and you're not even allowed to get a full night's sleep.
Yep.
Oh my goodness. Okay.
Yeah. So in the morning, the fire watches, usually right around 5 a.m. They hit the lights. They start, banging the trash can, lights. And that's everyone's cue. You got to get up now. Usually at that point, most recruits are, starting to tighten up their racks and get them put together. Within a certain amount of time, they're expected to be on the line. Down the squad bay, there's 2 lines on either side where the racks are. and basically you need to be standing on that line within a certain amount of time. Then the drill instructors will kind of take a look, down the, see if there's any racks that are, jacked up. If they are, of course, they'll do some, instant corrective measures, and then, we'll start getting, dressed to go to morning chow. And the way they get you dressed is, they'll be like, when you first start, grab your trousers right now, and they'll start counting down 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, and you got to be back on the line holding your trousers out in front of you. They'll be like, put my trousers on right now, 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, and you got to quickly put your trousers on, and they'll be like, not fast enough, take them off, put my trousers back on, 5, 4, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, and it's all about like trying to do things under pressure, but at the time it just seems like they're messing with you. And then, once they finally had enough of that, grab your blouse right now, next piece, put your blouse on right now, you got to button it up, eventually everyone's dressed and they're like, okay, get outside in formation. And we know that we got to go out there. And even when the platoon leaves our squad bay, 2 recruits are left back for firearms to watch the weapons. So 2 recruits will take off to the chow hall before the platoon even starts moving.
Are these people chosen at random? Or do you sort of take it in turns?
No, they're assigned. You'll have early chow, what's called early chow and late chow. So the early chow recruits will, the second, they say get in formation for chow, the early chow will just start running to the chow hall. So their job is to just eat their chow as quickly as they can. Then they're going to run back while the platoon's going to the chow hall to relieve the late chow recruits, who are then going to run to the chow hall and try and catch up. By the time the platoon is back to the squad bay, late chow should be like catching up.
Do you remember specifically your late chow duties?
I actually didn't get put on late chow until about midway through. One of our recruits got sick and he had to go to MRP, medical recovery platoon. So that's another way you can get dropped, is if you get like injured or sick. So then that's when I got put on late chow. So our duties were, while we were there, ensure that no one stole a rifle. Make sure that no one entered the squad bay who wasn't authorized to be in the squad bay. Any drill instructor that arrived, we were to report our post to him. Essentially, we'd have to run up, good morning, sir, recruit so-and-so reporting, everything all clear, blah, 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 so many rifles, locked, so many, foot lockers locked, et cetera, et cetera. And then, of course, they'd probably tell you, good, get out of my face, go back to waiting for early chow or the platoon to show up. And then once early chow relieved us, we'd start running, just gobble down our food as fast as we could, and then run back.
And was there ever an incident that you remember where anybody's rifle did go missing or anything was used in a way that it shouldn't have been?
No, because they're on you like hawks.
Right.
It would be very difficult to actually, steal a rifle, let alone misplace it, because it's basically your new right hand. It goes everywhere you go. So
right. So for anybody that has seen Full Metal Jacket, it kind of is a very accurate depiction in terms of the respect that you are supposed to give this rifle that now belongs to you.
Yep, pretty much. Granted, there's a lot less getting struck by your drill instructors. Full Metal Jacket definitely has that. But as far as I saw, the only time a drill instructor ever had to like hit a recruit was when the recruit was trying to hit the drill instructor.
Wow, right. So they're in self-defense to protect themselves. Yeah. I'm just looking at. So Full Metal Jacket was released in 1987. I wonder if back in 80, it would have been more familiar to see a drill instructor be physical with a recruit in that sense, as opposed to kind of you in the early 2000s maybe. And again, this is just speculation and me only drawing on the information that I've been given through various different media sources.
Yeah. But also remember, they were portraying back in the 60s during Vietnam.
Yes, of course they were. Absolutely. Yep. So even in the 80s to the 60s, there was probably a very, very big difference from the 60s to the 80s and the 80s to the 2000s. And then the 2000s to now the 2020s, very big shifts, I imagine, from every 20 years to the next.
It's kind of funny you say that, because I recently saw something where it was an article stating how the Marine Corps Command was finally figuring out they need to treat Marines like people. And that headline boggled my mind. I'm like, they're just now figuring this out. We used to always joke that they made our lives miserable so that in combat we'd be more effective fighting. So
wow. I've just Googled now, when did the Marines start? And it said that the United States Marine Corps started on the 10th of November, 1775. And only recently, in 2021, have people started to realize that perhaps Marines need to be treated like human beings.
Yeah, it's pretty amazing. And that date right there, as a Marine, will be etched into your brain forever. I still celebrate the Marine Corps birthday on November 10th.
Wow, so only a few days before then.
Yep. No, it's definitely a duty to go out and hoist one or two, for the Marine Corps. And, shoot, I celebrate that more than my own birthday.
Oh my goodness. And I know that Thanksgiving is a big thing over in America. Do you feel like the 10th of November is more significant for you than Thanksgiving is?
For me, yes. For Marines, that is a very, very significant day. For me personally, I'm just not a holiday guy. So that's one of the few holidays that, I've kind of made mine, and most Marines will probably tell you the same thing. And the whole thing of it is on the Marine Corps birthday, we have the Marine Corps ball. The units will, have a whole ceremony all about it. We have traditions where we'll have a cake, and the oldest Marine will cut the cake and hand it to the youngest Marine in the unit as a way of kind of
like a rite of passage. Yeah.
It's symbolism of handing the traditions down to the new, new Marines coming in.
I am so surprised by this. I'm so surprised because on the same sheet it says that the United States Army was first officially created on the 14th of June, 1775. So in the same year, just a few months earlier. So the Marines were in November and the Army was in June. And it says that the October was the Navy. And now in my mind, I feel like the Marines are more specialist than the Army and the Navy, but they were all officially labeled or titled in the same year as one another, which is really interesting to me.
I mean, essentially right before our nation was actually, because remember, 1776 was when
Independence Day. Yeah. And for anybody that doesn't know why America celebrates the 4th of July, it's independence from the England. So me basically talking to you, it's your independence from me and this country, which is I read back and it's weird to talk about Thanksgiving and all of the connotations and cultural things that come associated with Thanksgiving, but then again, when people talk about the 4th of July and absolutely every other country's independence from England, because England have in some way done something wrong to absolutely every single civilization on this planet. And it does make me feel kind of like I want to bury my head in the sand when I read about the actual scope and depth of England and their presence and difficulty on so many other nations. So I
like they used
extend
to
my
say,
apology, to people, like when we talk about Independence Day, me and my friend who lives in New Jersey, we're like, oh, your independence from me, haha. And then it's like, but it's probably not actually funny to a lot of people. So it's important to make that distinction, I feel, because some people do get hurt.
Yeah, I think the reason that Americans kind of make more jokes about that is because we won our independence versus you having to like just give it, Canada and Australia is apparently still cool.
I was absolutely just going to say that then. You said, and some people just take their independence, and I was thinking, and some people don't, because the Queen is still the Queen in more places than just here, which is strange.
But then you got like other countries, like, for example, India and some of the South African countries where it was more of a just your influence pulled back, and then they were able to assert their independence, and it was kind of different. I have to go back into history books, but I don't think another country actually battled you and won. I don't know. I have
no idea. We're such a small country. I don't know. And again, this is another thing that I need to scratch up on.
The empire used to be fairly large. If I remember, they said something about the sun never sets on the British Empire. It used to be. Everybody
talks about the Queen, and I look at her and she's so close to 100 and she's so small and she's like very vulnerable, and I know that there will always be another predecessor to the crown, and it's weird because I feel like that's such an archaic system that doesn't really even make sense anymore, and people are always like, what does the Queen even do? And it's just a weird thing. And then there are people like over like in different countries like America who collect plates and cups and weird memorabilia with the Queen's face on it, and really revere her as a person. We've talked about how you were expected to wear uniform and wear uniform in a certain way. So there are restrictions on your clothing, and you've talked about how there are restrictions on your leisure time. And even if you are awarded leisure time, there is a chance that could be taken over by the pit or the quarterdeck, depending on whether you were going to be inside or outside. So when you talked about going off to meal times and eating your food really fast and then getting back to whatever task you were supposed to be doing, like, are your diets restricted in any way? Are you given like rationed portions, or are meal times just the same, or there's loads to go around, or what does that look like for the average recruit in boot camp?
Assuming that you're not like a fat body or, a stick, you're not given all the food you want, but you're given a decent amount. I actually ended up getting overfed from what I used to eat before, because I almost never ate. Like, I never ate breakfast. I would get like a small lunch and then eat dinner. And then all of a sudden I'm getting 3 squares a day at boot camp. So I actually went from 118 pounds to 135. So I ballooned.
And when you say fat body or stick, are those two phrases that you use, or are they ones that are used universally in the Marines?
The stick is more me, but fat body is basically anyone who's, fat. There are height weight standards. So for a certain height, you can't be above a certain weight. And they would put you on restricted rations.
Okay.
And make you do additional physical training to, try and burn that off. And then if you were underweight, there were a few recruits, they would be given double rats.
And you would be told that you need to finish your meals.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. For me, I was at that time the low end, but not considered like a double rat. So I just had normal meals, but I actually ended up intaking a whole lot more food than I used to.
Right. So and then was your diet changed from there because you'd put on more weight, or were you then kind of seen as somebody at a healthy weight at that time?
Around graduation, I was considered a healthy weight. This is where you're supposed to be.
Wow. Okay. And what about restrictions around relationships? I know you've spoken about the women being sort of in a different place than you were, but what about people of same-sex attraction? Was there any restrictions around relationships in that sense?
Oh, absolutely. If it so happened that, two male recruits were found together, that would have repercussions. It was any type of sexual activity during boot camp, it was verboten. Absolutely not.
And what types of repercussions would be normal for any type of relationship happening?
Things like that could, granted, you are a Marine, but you're still subject to the Uniform Code of Military Justice. And seeing as you've been told and ordered, you are not to have any sexual activity during this time frame. So you could end up getting, non-judicial punishment. If it's really bad, you could end up being, court-martialed for, failure to follow, orders and stuff like that. The likelihood of it getting to a court-martial is slim to none. Non-judicial punishment, a good possibility. One of the recruits at this time being dropped to another platoon, very likely.
So separating those that have been involved with one another.
Right.
Do you feel like the court-martial stuff may be more for people that have acted without the consent of the other party?
Oh, absolutely. If it turned out to be a sexual assault case, that's a crime, and they will absolutely just burn you for it.
Have you known any of that to happen whilst you were a part of the Marines?
We did have one guy. It wasn't necessarily a sexual assault, but unfortunately, it was a very unfortunate instance when I was in the Marine Corps. When I was in Okinawa, the legal age in Okinawa is to drink and everything is 18, right?
Right.
So there was a Marine. He was out in town, and a dependent, which is like someone who's like, a daughter, wife, or someone who is dependent on the service member. Okay. So a dependent was out in town, and they had a fake license and had gotten into one of these Japanese bars. And, the Marine at the time, they got together, and it turned out this dependent was underage. But of course, why would he? It was an 18 or over bar, how did she get in? She had a fake license. Well, it's still technically statutory, and he ended up going to the brig.
That's a difficult one, isn't it?
Mm-hmm.
We see that in the media a lot with celebrities and certain personalities. And of course, how would he have known if she had a license to enter the premises in the first place? Yep.
And it's just one of those things, like they still tell you, it may sound stupid, but ask to see the license,
Mm-hmm.
Because unfortunately he took it at face value. She was in there, but it's still his responsibility. At least at that point, if he'd asked to see it and she showed it to him, he's like, she gave me a license and it said it, at that point it's,
Mm-hmm.
But he couldn't. Even then, depending on who it is in charge and stuff, that, because I believe that particular statute, it doesn't matter the context of how it happened. It's just that it happened.
And when you were going through your boot camp and basic training, I know you talked about the one guy who was in your peer group who was recycled into the next group of people going through boot camp. But hazing is something that I've been reading up about and interested in for a while. And I've been reading about it in terms of like British boarding schools and armed services over here. So I'm wondering if hazing was a thing that happened where you were, kind of with the soap and the pillow bags that we talked about before, and things like that. If it was something you knew happened, if you ever experienced it, and I'm just wondering if you have any insight around that whatsoever in terms of your time in the Marines.
even starting from my time in boot camp, we were always told hazing is unacceptable and will never be, if you see hazing, report it, et cetera, et cetera. Once I got to the fleet, there are a few instances where it's kind of like, this might be hazing, but there's so much leeway in what a uh, a superior can do, you know, and it also depends on like what you know people consider hazing. So it's kind of one of those like, me personally, I never was hazed directly, but I think I wouldn't consider it hazing myself, but it was kind of messed up. We had this one guy who was gotten popped for underage drinking, and they basically kind of had him just standing at attention outside for a couple hours while they were like trying to figure out what to do with him. I mean, it was technically a legal order, stand at attention right here, but it was for quite a while. So it's like, mm, mm.
And you were never subjected to anything like that. Nothing like that ever happened to you.
No, I was a good cookie. After 3 years of service with no incidents, you get a good conduct medal. So I never had it.
Wait. So hazing's not allowed. Don't take part in it. Don't do anything that's like that. And if you don't, after a certain amount of time, we'll give you a medal for it.
Well, it's not necessarily don't take part in hazing and stuff. It's just basically if you get through a set amount of time without being NJP'd, without being non-rec, which is not recommended for promotion, without having, documented, issues, then you get a good conduct. Right. So it's not necessarily you didn't haze anyone. It's more of a, anything you may have done what didn't show up on our radar. So good job, I guess,
But I feel like it's kind of almost the same thing. Like,
well, there's a joke referring to that is like, if the Marine Corps didn't want you to misbehave, they wouldn't give you a medal for behaving.
Yes, that's it. That's it. You've summed it up perfectly. That's exactly what I was then thinking in my head. I was like, hang on a minute. There's two things working here in my brain, and you've just that's it. And I guess this kind of leads us perfectly into another thing that I wanted to speak about. And that was something that you brought up to me in our notes when we were discussing the questions that I was going to ask today. So the ROTC that you had at high school, it was an Army ROTC.
Correct.
And when I asked you what years you served in the Army, you responded to me and said, actually, I never served in the Army. I served in the Marine Corps. And there's a very distinct difference, and it's a very important difference. And it's something that I wanted to talk about and highlight. So would you like to just let the listeners know why that distinction and that difference is so important?
Yeah, absolutely. So that is one of the things in boot camp that they kind of beat into your head is, when you graduate, you will be a Marine, because the Army has soldiers, the Air Force has airmen, the Navy has seamen, but the Marine Corps has Marines. Marine is in the title. So whenever like someone like walks up to you and you say, yeah, I served in the Marine Corps, or, yeah, I served in the military. They're like, oh, you were a soldier? It's like, no, I was a Marine. It's specific, I'm a Marine. And it's pretty much how it's always going to be. One of the things that they also beat into your head is, once you are a Marine, you're always a Marine. You may leave the Marine Corps and go do other things, but you're always a Marine. So,
and so it kind of then births that us versus them in terms of non-military and military people, non-Marines and Marine personnel or recruits. And then you also mentioned that there was almost that distinction within the Marines in terms of different ranks, with the us versus them concept in terms of this type of Marine and that type of Marine.
Okay. Yeah. So yeah, there's definitely an us versus them for like Marines and everyone else. If you ain't a Marine, your opinion is invalid. Then in the Marine Corps, there is a bit of stratification. It's not quite ranks, but it's more based on jobs. So like for me, I'm what they refer to as a POG, position other than POG. And so because I was an electrician, a grunt is what we call our infantry. They are combat arms. Generally, a lot of times tankers and stuff might fall into that because they would be directly in combat. But if you're basically not combat arms, MOS, military occupation specialty, if you're not a combat arms specialty, you're pretty much considered other. So like there's tiers within the Marine Corps, you know. So it's like you got grunts, other combat arms, and then other, you know, like non combat arms like admin. I was considered utilities because in my shop we had all the heavy equipment, generators, things like that. So pretty much in a lot of cases, in the rest of the Marine Corps, we didn't much care about that. But if you had to deal with grunts, that's when it became an issue.
You went through boot camp. Everybody's the same level in boot camp.
Right.
And once you... Oh, hang on a minute. How does your... Wait. So you go through boot camp. How does your ROTC stuff play into this? Do you go into basic training private first class instead of private?
Nope. You're recruits. You're a recruit until you graduate.
All right.
Once I graduated, I got to be a private first class. Whereas someone who may not have gone through ROTC would be a private.
Just like, it's like so much.
So you're kind of wondering where the grunts and everyone else kind of split off. Okay.
Yes.
Okay. So essentially, once you complete your boot camp, you're going to go to one of two places. If you're a grunt, you're going to the School of Infantry. If you're anything else than a grunt, you're going to Marine Combat Training. So in School of Infantry, that's where they teach them all the like high speed, low drag, you know, shoot, kill, how to move in, you know, squad formation, how to integrate into platoons, how to, you know, shoot and fire, you know, call for fire, all that cool stuff. In Marine Combat Training, you get like School of Infantry Light. You're going to shoot a bunch of different weapon systems so you're familiar with them.
Okay.
You're going to learn a little bit about land navigation and how to like, you know, navigate around the area. But you're only going to be doing this for like a couple, like 2 or 3 weeks, whereas School of Infantry is like months. And then once you leave MCT, then you go to your job school. So for me, I went from Parris Island, South Carolina, to MCT Camp Geiger in Jacksonville, North Carolina, to Courthouse Bay, North Carolina.
Oh my goodness. Okay.
Yeah. But all the School of Infantry guys, they go straight to the Camp Geiger and they stay there until they're done. And then they get sent out to whatever grunt unit they go to.
Lots of moving around, lots of different things to experience. Is it just normal for you at that point to just be in a constant state of transition?
Pretty much. Yeah. It was hard to say because in boot camp, even though you kind of knew what was coming up, you were still doing a lot of stuff. You know, it was coming at you pretty fast. So once you get orders and they tell you where to go, you're like, okay, well, I've already done it once going to boot camp. What's going somewhere new? No big whoop. So, you know, show up to Camp Geiger, do whatever they needed. Then I went to Courthouse Bay to learn how to operate generators. And then around that time, when I graduated from Courthouse Bay, I got a few months of humanitarian reassignment because we found out that my father had cancer. So I had to come back to Florida.
Right. Okay. And the Marines were accommodating of that when you found out about that diagnosis?
Yeah.
Okay.
I found out during my leave because I was supposed to go to Okinawa at that time, but then I found out
Right.
that he was, found out like I already knew he was sick and they'd already taken steps and thought he was getting better. But when I went home on leave between completing my school and then going to Okinawa, I found out, okay, no, my dad had gotten much worse. So I was
Right.
able to,
Okay.
so I was able to go to one of the local reserve stations and request a temporary transfer.
Had your family decided to keep that from you to protect you from that information because they knew where you were and what you were doing? Or was it a real sudden turn where you found out when you were on leave at the same time that it all happened, that this was what the situation was with your father?
It was pretty much a sudden turn, pretty much right around the time that I was finishing up graduating job school is
Okay.
pretty much when his health, took a dive. So by the time I got back to Florida, he was, in a bad way. And that's when I requested the transfer.
And the transfer was successful.
Yeah.
And so you were able to stay close to your father during that time of medical care and recovery.
Yeah. Pretty much I graduated October. So from the end of October to the beginning of January was when I had that transfer, and I was there. The reserve station over in Tampa, Fourth Assault Amphibian, is where I was, and it was they were actually getting ready to go over to Iraq because they were um, getting ready at the time. So I pretty much, since they didn't have a need for a generator operator, I basically stood gate guard for most of my time there.
And was your father able to recover from his diagnosis?
Unfortunately, he was not, and he passed in January. So that's why in January my temporary accommodation ended, and then
Right.
I went to Okinawa.
I'm so sorry to hear that. It must be so difficult to I understand that your stepmom played such a prevalent role in your
Mm-hmm.
upbringing in your life, but it must have been so difficult to lose both parents, both biological parents.
Yeah, at the time it definitely affected me. But yeah, I've come to terms with it. I mean, unfortunately, as bad as it is to say, when I saw how bad he had gotten, and in the months that I was there on the transfer, when he finally passed, it was kind of more of a blessing.
Yeah. And I don't think that's an uncommon thing to hear. I often think that that's quite a humane thing to hear from somebody that has experienced the deterioration of a family member that can happen when they have that type of illness so quickly. And when you have the love and support of your family around you, I feel like that makes a huge difference, and often people speak about the ability to be able to have final conversations with their loved one before they pass, as opposed to having a sudden death in the family where you weren't able to have those conversations and make your final wishes known and to express how you think and feel about somebody before all of those things happen. And I can't imagine it gets any easier. I've only ever experienced sudden deaths in the family. But I know that your father with his father must have been proud of you being a member of the armed forces and to know that you were kind of on your way to fulfilling the career path that you had chosen. But it's
Absolutely.
yeah. Did you were you able to have those candid conversations with your father before he passed away?
Oh yeah, I definitely knew how he felt about me joining the Marine Corps a long time before he finally succumbed to it. So, you know, we had plenty of talks, and I knew that's why I wasn't too put out by finally fulfilling my orders and going to Okinawa because we both discussed it was part of what I needed to do, and so
let's just quickly recap your timeline.
Mm-hmm.
You're 17 in high school, you graduate at 18, you join the Marine Corps, you go into your basic training, you are in boot camp, it's for 13 weeks. Eventually you go through these different places that you live in.
I do want to kind of go back because one thing I didn't really go over about boot camp is how much Marine Corps history you get.
Right. Okay. So you are 17 in school, you graduate at 18, you go into basic training. It's for 13 weeks. During this training, you go through all these different things. You go through the field days with your rifle padlocked to your bed. You go through all of these different things of understanding how people dress and what their uniform means and the different chevrons and all of that stuff. And
how to greet them, how to take orders. You learn, like I said, the history of the Marine Corps, starting from what you said earlier. We were born November 10th, 1775 in Tun Tavern, Pennsylvania. Our first commandant was Samuel Nichols, and he raised the first regiment of Marines. Our first female Marine was Opha May Johnson. You learn about Chesty Puller in the Chosin Reservoir. You learn about Dan Daly. You learn about John Basilone in Guadalcanal. I mean, you learn about all of our famous battles from Tarawa to Guadalcanal to Okinawa, Belleau Wood, where we suppose, a lot of people debate this, but ask any Marine, and that's where we earned our nickname Teufelhunden from the Germans, meaning devil dog, and Belleau Wood. So you get all of that information, just pounded into you every day, and they always give you little ditties on how to like learn this stuff. Like they'll ask what rank is a sergeant, and you'll have to respond, sir, a sergeant's rank is 3 stripes up and crossed rifles, sir. And every rank has its own little ditty to remember. What's a gunnery sergeant? Sir, a gunnery sergeant is 3 stripes up, 2 stripes down, crossed rifles, sir. And you add all that together, and that really kind of brings out the mindset of a Marine, because you learn so much about the history and everything that it's really hard to explain the amount of history we get just on our branch.
Wow, that's incredible that you're able to just reel off all of those facts that you've given us. And I find it so interesting that there is a specific date that is celebrated for the first woman joining the Marines. I find that like a really interesting tidbit of information that they would focus on in your boot camp training.
Oh yeah, we learn about all sorts of things. Like the first Marine Corps aviator was Alfred A. Cunningham. So we know that the first pilot for the Marine Corps, the first female for the Marine Corps. Let's see. It has been a long time since I've had to recite this stuff, so I am going from memory.
But you mentioned as well that there was Marine Week and Family Day that was included in some of your leisure time when you were in your boot camp training. So was Family Day something that your father was able to come along to?
Unfortunately, no, because he was finishing up his first round of like treatments, so he wasn't able to. But my mother, my grandmother, and my grandfather, the one who had served in the Signal Corps, they were all there for my graduation.
So that was pretty significant then for you and your family members, for them to all be a part of you graduating at your boot camp.
Oh yeah, no, it was definitely great that they were able to make it. I know there were some, now that they had graduated, Marines who didn't have family show up, and I saw how it affected them. So I was kind of glad that I wasn't in that position. But one thing I did want to touch on about boot camp before we kind of go away from that is the crucible.
Yes, that was the next thing I was going to ask. That's one of the things like not scribbled off on my page, crucible underlined, because you said something we'll talk about more later on. And I was like, okay, I'll make a note of that. So yeah, the crucible.
Right. So in your final weeks of the boot camp, you're going to go through the crucible. It's a 3-day exercise that's basically a culmination of all your training so far. So it starts off on the first day. You're going to do a 10-kilometer hike, and you're going to be doing what these stations are called core value stations and warrior stations. So the core value stations is basically they're going to have like a citation of a famous Marine or battle or something that happened in Marine Corps history, and your drill instructors are basically going to give you a period of instruction of what happened, at such and such battle, or what this Marine did to earn their citations. At the warrior stations, you're going to be doing these exercises. Like you'll have like these piles of tires that represent the 2 riverbanks, and you've got to get these cans of ammo. I mean, they're cans filled with sand, but cans of ammo across this riverbank using these equipment that's here. And you got to work as a team to try and solve these puzzles. But you're doing this all in full armor. You're carrying your rifle. You can't lose your rifle. You got to keep your flak jacket on. You got to keep all your gear on. And so basically you're carrying everything, but also have to get this other stuff over or under or around these obstacles somehow. And then you basically are doing this for 3 days with minimal sleep. That you might maybe catch an hour or so of sleep each night, because they're going to have night exercises. They've got like the live fire course where you're basically low crawling through the mud and under barbed wire. And they've got, machine guns with blanks, firing over your heads.
Wow. Oh my goodness. That's terrifying.
Yep. And then on the final day of the crucible, you do a 15-kilometer march back to the parade deck, and you essentially have what's called the emblem ceremony, where the drill instructors literally hand you your eagle, globe, and anchor emblem, which normally goes on your garrison cover. And basically that's the symbolic gesture of you've become a Marine.
Oh my goodness. Okay, so 15 kilometers is like almost 10 miles. So to change those, like, so the metric system and all that stuff, that's a very significant distance to go after all of this strenuous physical stuff that you've taken part in. To then do the 15 kilometers at the end is a pretty kind of significant last push to get to your medal.
Oh, absolutely. I know we had some recruits right there at the end that like they look like they were about to just fall out and topple over, and we would just grab them by the armpits, and because we're basically at this point, no one is failing now, because if you don't complete it, they're not gonna pass you.
Wow. And how do you feel when you get to your graduation ceremony, where you are finally no longer a boot, you are an official member of the Marine Corps?
Well, I mean, you're still a boot, but once you're handed that emblem, it was like I could have walked another 15. I felt amazing. It was one of the greatest days of my life.
It's so interesting that you've said that, because with the troubled teen industry that I cover so much on the podcast, there are so many episodes where people talk about their institutionalized abuse that they experience in these wilderness camps and therapeutic boarding schools, that I say in inverted commas and air quotes, that at their graduation ceremony, when their families are there and they're surrounded by loved ones and people that they haven't been able to speak to or see during these entire programs, and after all these difficult things that they've been through, the graduation ceremonies that they're almost euphoric experiences for people. So they go away feeling like the last 2 or 3 years of their lives have been positive experiences. And it's only in the aftermath of coming out of those that they realized that the experiences that they had during their time there were actually pretty traumatic and exploitative. And a few of the people I've interviewed experienced severe PTSD and are having to go for professional treatment. But the graduation ceremony poses itself as a tool to almost make people feel like as they leave, it was only
a triumph,
a positive experience that they endured, despite all of the restricted and difficult tasks that were imposed on them during those experiences. I don't know if you feel like the Marines were similar to that in any way.
I could see that. I mean, obviously the time frame is probably a bit condensed because you said these people were doing it for like years. 13 weeks, I would say. I mean, it was definitely once I got that Eagle Globe Anchor in my hand, I was through the roof.
Yeah.
And of course, in my actual graduation ceremony where we were out there in our Charlie uniform, and we had our families in the bleachers and stuff, and they had the band playing music and stuff. I mean, shoot, I probably could have just walked to Florida on clouds.
What is a Charlie uniform?
Charlie uniform is I don't know if you've seen a Marine Corps uniform. It's the green pants with the tan shirt and the green cover. Look up not dress Charlies, service U.S. Marine Corps service Charlies. We refer to them as Chucks. It'll be a short sleeve tan shirt, long green trousers, black shoes. The officers' one is slightly different, but you get the basic gist of it.
So this is somebody who is in the United States Marine Corps Charlie uniform.
Yeah, that's essentially it. Yeah, and it is the trousers will be the same color as the cover, and he's got the cover pushed over in a nice jaunty angle.
This guy?
Yep, that is actually those are dress deltas because you see how he's got the blues.
Wow.
Trousers.
Oh my goodness. It's amazing that I can show you this picture and you automatically know in just a few split seconds, like the difference between his rank and a different rank and the rank that we're talking about. Okay, this is a generic one with.
Yep, those are Chucks.
Right. Okay. So these are Chucks. So you're wearing these are Chucks. Charlie is Chuck. So I can make that association without asking you question.
Chuck is basically your standard, like, if we're not wearing the camouflage utility uniform, which is the camouflage, obviously, because that's in the name. Though that's like our next step up for a work.
Right, okay. And this mad, like, looking badge at the top here, is that standard for you in your truck uniform, or is that pretty specialized because it has
all that what we refer to fruit salad above the pocket, those are those are ribbons, those are citations that Marine would have
right. And this guy, he's a sergeant major. Just look at is like that a pretty significant one there? I feel like that's a lot.
Yep. And I can tell you that the wings up at the top means he's a pilot of some sort. And the badges from the bottom are marksmanship badges for rifle and pistol.
Wow. It's amazing that you can just tell me that off the... What? Oh, wait. Here's a guy with what did you call them above the pocket?
Oh, fruit salad. It's just a general term for all the ribbons and stuff. So
I just had a picture of somebody with so much fruit salad. It's amazing.
Yeah, when you get to the higher ranks, like sergeant major and whatnot, you're generally going to have a boatload of ribbons, and definitely depending on whether they're wearing Chucks or the Alphas. Alpha is the coat that you saw, the green coat with the shooting badges.
Oh, it says here a chesty stack is another name for the fruit salad generally given to Marines who either have a very large stack or a single ribbon. Fruit salad, 1 ribbons and badges as worn on uniform.
Mm-hmm.
That is wow. I had no idea that it was like, whoa, look at this guy. He has loads. Oh my goodness.
Mm-hmm.
Wow, you've just opened up a whole nother. I don't know if you can see this guy. He's got like a whole chest full of them.
Yep. Looks like Army. Because we don't have all the extra badges on the below the pockets.
To you, it's like, oh well, I know it's really obvious to me. But to me, who's
But
never
it's one of those things like, definitely I've been, programmed to understand that stuff and see it and know, but someone who's not in the know, it definitely different. And I was going to say, it's funny you bring up chesty stack specifically for Marines, because Chesty Puller is basically, he's our most decorated Marine of all time. So that's why they refer to it as a chesty stack. But Chesty Puller, who was one of our most decorated Marines, he was referred to Chesty because he was actually like barrel chested. He had that like protruding kind of that chest, like kind of like the old boxers used to have, because he was really stocky. So
in these high demand control groups that we talk about, a lot of them have exclusive language that they use amongst themselves. Yeah. So you've mentioned a few of them, like boot earlier, you said, and that's why I wanted you to explain it, because a lot of the time this language is used to exclude us people on the outside who aren't familiar with the high demand control group itself. Mm-hmm. So fruit salad is like, the fact that you've said that to me, and now I'm looking at all of these pictures and I understand why that phrase is used, is really insightful to me. And it's interesting that you explained the Air Force as well. I mean, this is the last picture I'm going to show you, but what does this picture tell you?
Take a look. Okay. That? Yeah. So that's definitely an officer. And he's wearing his medals. So that means he's wearing his dress alphas.
Wow. Okay.
Medals are only authorized on the dress alphas. If he was wearing his dress bravos, he'd have ribbons.
Former chairman of the Joint Chiefs General Peter Pace, a combat Marine of Vietnam with one dazzling chest full of medals.
Yep.
Okay, I'm gonna stop googling fruit salads now because I'm taking myself down a rabbit hole like mid-interview.
One thing I was gonna say is because you were talking about nomenclature and different words and stuff, that the us versus them type stuff is it's kind of even worse for the Marine Corps because we're a Department of the Navy, so we use a lot of naval terminology as well. So it's not a floor, it's the deck. It's not a window, it's a porthole. A staircase is a ladder well. It's not a staircase. The head for a bathroom, that's naval terminology as well. So it kind of insulates us in the Navy away from like the other branches because they use completely different terminology.
Does it branch you away from the Navy in the same sense though? Because there's
if anything, that brings us and the Navy closer together because we are a Department of the Navy. Our entire purpose is essentially to be naval infantry. For the original 1775 Marines, our job was to be forces that could be on a ship, and if necessary, firing from the rigging to shoot officers on an enemy ship, or to be deployed on land from a ship. Now we're basically a global expeditionary force. But because we work so much with the Navy and we have what's called Marine Expeditionary Units, these units literally for 6 months to a year will just sail around in a ship around the world, just ready to deploy to wherever. So because we work with the Navy so much, having all that naval terminology kind of brings us a little closer together.
Right. So there's the us versus them in terms of the Marines and people that aren't in the Marines, and then the us or even the people who are in the forces and not in the forces. Then the Marines in terms of we're the Marines, we're not the Army, we're not the Air Force, we are the Marines.
Right.
And then there's the us versus them in terms of I am this rank in the Marines, I'm not that rank. Or I am this rank and you are a lower rank than I am.
I think you're going back to the Pogue and Grunts thing. So that's more
Yes.
job related. But there is a rank thing similar. We have what's called fraternization, where, generally someone who's in your chain of command who works above you can't like hang out with you and be your drinking buddy, because that could set a bad precedent of you like, trying to like give them unfair advantages, or, it could, bring, it could look bad, and they try to avoid that with the fraternization. So like, for example, when I was a Lance Corporal, I had 2 roommates. One of the things is when you get promoted to corporal and you become an NCO, they put you in a room with just another corporal, one. So you get one less roommate. So I was promoted and they put me in another room because one, they don't, that one of the privileges of being an NCO is you stick with another NCO and you get put in a different room. NCO means non-commissioned officer.
Okay.
And so once you become an NCO, you get that, perk of only having one roommate versus 2. And and once you become a sergeant, you get the perk of having one room to yourself.
Yeah. Okay, I can see it. Yeah. I was then going to say, like, I can predict how this is going to progress, and then
and then of course staff NCOs have their own separate barracks where they all get their own rooms, assuming they're not married and living on-base housing.
Which is a thing that we, I think, have over here as well, in terms of spouse and family moving to join the person that is in the forces. Yeah.
And they also, sometimes off-base housing as well, because I know some Marines in Okinawa were actually allowed to live out in town. So they lived in like Japanese houses.
Right. And you mentioned that when you are taught to learn and understand and respect the history of the Marines in such an in-depth and meticulous level, that you are taught about the first time that the Marines go over to Okinawa, or I don't know if infiltrate is the right word.
We assaulted. I would say assault, because infiltrate would imply sneakiness, but it was an assault after, like, I think it was 2 or 3 straight days of bombardment from the Navy.
So when you talk about the Marines first going over to Okinawa in Japan, it's interesting that you learn in depth about that history and then yourself go over to live in Okinawa, Japan.
Yeah, it is definitely an eye-opener. I mean, because there's still ruins and monuments and stuff to the battle. So I actually went to, they've got Peace Park there, whereas it's kind of like the Vietnam War Memorial, but for the Japanese. They've got all the like names and stuff of the Japanese.
Wow. Oh my goodness. Okay.
Yeah. So that was interesting to go see. And I got to go see actual like pillboxes and stuff, where, Japanese defenders were, would have been shooting at, Marines trying to assault up the mountains. And like, we learned a lot about that, like the reverse slope defenses. Because what these, the Japanese would do is we'd come over a hill and we'd be fighting up the hill. And once we got to like the summit, the Japanese on that hill would kind of retreat into the tunnels. And the Japanese on the other side on another hill would start shooting at us. And then as, we tried going back down the hill to get to the next one, the Japanese on the hill we had just left would pop out and start shooting at us from behind. So it was definitely a slog, a terrible fight for those Marines at that time.
It's funny because even when you speak to me now, you're almost using the us and them language with like, we would do this and they would do that and we would do this. And I guess that's a product of how you were taught during your basic training.
Yeah. And it actually, as I was just saying it, I was making efforts to, separate me, the me, we, I was trying the Marines
Mm-hmm.
of that time. It would have been so, I would have just said, yeah, this is what we did, you know, but I was like, I wasn't there, and I was thinking about it in the
It's
terms of
hard.
consumption.
It is hard.
Yes.
It's like a minefield. It is.
Uh-huh.
And it's the same when I am interviewing people and I'm trying to make sure that I don't say the wrong thing or use the wrong set, which is why I said earlier before, is the Marines or Marine Corps, which is the right terminology to use, because it's very difficult to make sure that you're not wording things in a way that might be misconstrued or in a way that might upset some people. But if it's the history that you've been taught, it's like we did this and they did that, and then we did this and they did that. It's very interesting to hear you talk and hear that that's almost the way that you were educated, because the way that you're even when you're trying to be mindful of the way that you are explaining the situation, it's for me to be able to say, oh, the yes versus them is still prevalent in the way that you talk.
Very much so.
Your father is given this diagnosis, and unfortunately he doesn't recover from that, and that happens just before you go over to Ikonoa, and so you go over there. And what are your experiences in being part of the Marines? As you're a generator operator, you're at this point you're working, you understand your place in the grand scheme of things and how things run in the Marines. How does the rest of your journey progress after this?
So I arrive, and for a short time they have you in like a transitional, like not quite a unit, but it's like a little group, just to kind of be like, hey, this is what you do here, this is what you don't do, here's a phrase book, here's some Japanese customs, and this is before we get sent to our actual units. This was like a little bit of an orientation to the island of Okinawa and the Japanese. And I just remember riding in the little bus from the airport to the building they kept us at, and just being gobsmacked at just like the signs and seeing all the people and the cars, and just like, oh my goodness, I'm going to be here for a year. At the time, I thought it was going to be a year. So I go through this little transition group, and I finally get sent to my unit, and they pretty much welcomed me. But of course they're ragging, boot, you're the new guy, the usual. And I started learning how to fit in, because the Fleet Marine Force versus boot camp, MCT, and job school is completely different, as those were all like learning environments, and there's a certain regimentation to it all. Once you get to the Fleet Marine Force, you kind of lose some of that, and you actually you've got free time, you've got weekend liberty, you've got the ability to kind of cut loose,
to actually explore.
Yeah. And I mean, doing so as a visitor to a completely new country, I was just like, what? I was not ready for it. Culture shock was in effect. So unfortunately, for my first few months in Okinawa, I stayed on the base because I just had no idea what to do. I was sheltered. I was like, I didn't want to leave the base because everything was foreign and scary. It wasn't until later that basically who I now refer to as my brother from another mother, showed up to the unit. Right. He eventually became my roommate, and he was my roommate when I was a lance corporal. I got promoted, then he got promoted after me, and we gamed the barracks manager to let us be roommates again. And so like we were roommates for like 3 years.
Right. Okay. So you made a very, very good friend during this time.
Oh, absolutely. And he's the one who kind of forced me out of my shell, because he's just one of those outgoing, let's go do
Right.
something. So eventually we started like going out, and like eventually like my worldview completely shifted.
Okay.
I was like, man, this place is awesome. I
Yeah.
went from being like, I don't want to be here to like, this is amazing. So like we were going out, hanging out, meeting people, and
Experiencing the culture and
mhm.
realizing that the similarities between your community and the Japanese community in Okinawa was probably not that different, maybe after all.
Yeah, it definitely depended on where you went, because there was definitely a contingent of Okinawans who were just Yankee go home.
Yeah,
Um,
yeah, 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 yeah,
yeah.
yeah.
So I mean, unfortunately, there is an issue there, which is kind of completely its own thing. But no, I went out. I was getting used to the place, but it's still all through the lens of Marine Corps. It's like man, there's a battle here, and this and eventually I was sent to other not quite training exercises that you talk to some people, they're like, that's not a deployment, so it's training exercises. So I went to Thailand twice. I went to the Philippines. I had a trip to Russia one time. So I got to see all these places, and it was all through the lens of the Marine Corps. So it was, I kind of like, if I went back there as a civilian now, like, how would I see it?
And from what you told us at the start of the episode, you were only in the Marines for a number of years. So what happened for you to decide that you no longer wanted to pursue a career in the Marine Corps?
I honestly would have stayed in, but I found out that the unit that I was going, like I'd be going back to the States to, was itself about to go overseas. And I was like, 3 years consecutively living overseas. No, nope, no. And I was like, I want to stay in the States. And I didn't really pursue any options through the Marine Corps to see if that was possible, because at that point I was just like, I want to go home.
Right. So even though you'd had like an enriching and eye-opening and insightful experience in Japan, it wasn't somewhere you wanted to stay for the long term. You did feel like you wanted to go home and be.
That's not correct, because at the time I had a Japanese girlfriend and I would have stayed in Japan. But in order to do so, I would either have to have married her, and then the Marine Corps would have extended me for another 3 years.
Right.
Leave the Marine Corps and find a way to get like sponsorship to stay in Japan. Or I think that would have been pretty much it, because there was no other way to like stay in Japan. And
Right.
and since my Japanese was nowhere near that good at the time, staying in Japan was not really an option.
So it's not that you wanted to get out of Japan. It's that you weren't too sure about being placed in other parts of the world that were away from Japan or America.
Right. And because from what I understood, that unit was going overseas to a combat deployment.
Right.
But the thing of it is, for the 3 years that I'd been there, I had been requesting to go as an individual augment. So what individual augment is, they might take one or two Marines from a unit and send them to a unit who are in like a combat deployment, who might be missing, a Marine or two, to help, boost their numbers. So for 3 years, I had been requesting, let me go. And
Yeah.
the first year, they're like, no, you're a boot. You don't know anything. Why would we send you? The second year was, we don't have any electricians to replace you. You have to stay here.
Right.
And then the third year was, you're our most experienced electrician. We're sending a boot.
So you're in the handcuffs at that point. You can't,
Yeah.
they basically just said, like, we're never going to be able to, right. Okay. Yeah.
And at that point I was like, they're like, well, the unit you're going to is going overseas. I was like, I requested 3 times. I'm tired. I want to just go back to the States.
Yeah.
And since there's no guarantee that I'd be able to do that by staying in, I was just like, F it, I'm out.
So you join in 2002, you leave in 2006. Your mum, very insightful, very clever, by saying to you, you need to get a job in the Marines that is transferable outside of the Marines, and you don't want to go into combat. You want something you can leave the Marines with and use that in the outside communities. So you leave in 2006, and is she right at that point? Is this something you're able to apply to life outside of the Marines?
Absolutely not. Well, I don't say. Eventually, for a short time, I did get a job working as an apprentice electrician.
Okay.
But that was years after I left the Marine.
Right. Okay.
But once I immediately got out, I didn't get an electrical job. I was kind of aimless, trying to figure out what I wanted to do. I bounced around so much. I had like multiple jobs. Eventually my brother, who stayed in, came back from a deployment in Iraq and needed a good roommate because his previous roommate shafted him on a house they were renting together. So I moved up to North Carolina back with him, and that's where I ended up meeting my wife and stuff.
Okay, so when you say brother, this is the guy you met who was your brother from another mother in air quotes.
I refer to him as he is my brother essentially, like because when we were in the Marine Corps and after I got out, we visited my mom. I visited his family.
Right.
So he is essentially my brother. So I've got 2 sisters and who are biological, and then him is my brother.
Yes, yep, perfect. Okay, so you moved to North Carolina to be closer to your brother, and you meet your now wife from this move to North Carolina. Wow, the stars really aligned with you meeting this guy and moving to be closer to him.
Oh yeah, it actually really worked out because at the time he moved up, he got reassigned there, and I moved up to just give him a good roommate, and he ended up working as a combat instructor where he met his wife, who was a naval corpsman, a doc, basically like a combat medic. And right around the time that they got hitched and he was moving out of the house, my wife's apartment essentially blew up and she ended up moving in with me.
Wow. So you are in the Marines, and then you leave the Marines and you move up to North Carolina. You are closer to your brother from another mother, and you meet your now wife, and you're classed, once you've left the Marines officially, you're classed as a veteran.
Correct.
So you're now a veteran, and you are not using your generator operator status or knowledge so much, as opposed to kind of bouncing around and looking for things that fit. But everything falls into place once you go up to North Carolina and decide that this is where you're going to stay.
Yep, kind of. I always expected it to be temporary, and that's why I'm back in Florida. I had always told my brother, once, things worked for him, I was going to go back, and it did eventually get to the point where I told my wife, hey, I'm going back to Florida. I mean, if you want to come with me, you can, but I'm going back to Florida. And she was like, yeah, I dig it. And we ended up packing everything up and moving back down.
Yes. And what is your wife's name?
Nikki.
And we should give a big shout out and thank you to Nikki, because we always like to say thank you to the allies for being allies to the people that we interview on the show in terms of the experiences that they've been through, and for just being somebody that like loves and supports you and doesn't judge you and doesn't second guess anything and just says, yeah, do you know what? I'll move to Florida with you. It's no big deal. I'm with you. Let's go.
It's funny because she didn't know me when I was a Marine, but she's lived in North Carolina near a military base long enough to understand like mindset. And she's like, yeah, I know you're an asshole, but I still love you. So, because, part of the Marine Corps is, having that like aggressive mentality that sometimes, caustic humor where, sometimes our humor is a bit mean and stuff. And, she understands and sees the good in me being, even when I am being a little bit of an a-hole.
Something I wanted to ask you to reiterate before I ask you the last question, which is anything you think we've missed before we finish today, is to tell the listeners about the Marines being a cult joke that you said before we hit the record button today.
Yeah, it goes back to, because I said something about the Air Force being a corporation. So we always say that the Army and the Navy are branches of the military, and the Air Force is a corporation, but the Marine Corps is a cult. And I've heard that from other branches. They're like, you guys are nuts, and it's like, yeah. I mean, that's kind of make us this way,
And what advice do you have for people that have come out of the forces who have been in these high demand control situations and are looking to maybe reacclimate to everyday life or to have a life outside of their chosen military sect that is almost in line with typical everyday life?
Well, I don't want to, act like I know everyone who could be out there, but, the only thing you could do is take it one day at a time. If you've got buddies who are in or were in, be sure to reach out to them. You've got pretty much a built-in support network from the military, because of course everyone who is in has gone through everything you have. So it doesn't hurt to reach out to someone, who's already out or who may be getting out, to, speak to them, talk to them. Most Americans will be aware that, we got this 22 a day. There's a statistic that 22 veterans a day, end their lives. And it's just one of those things. Sometimes you just need to reach out. You've got a buddy that you think is having problems, or if you think you're having problems, reach out to your buddies, reach out to someone. Take it a day at a time, and if you can, speak to someone about it.
So take every day one step at a time, keep those lines of communication open, and accept that communication when it comes from a loved one, or open up those lines of communication if you feel like they have shut down with a loved one. But make sure that you're always in communication with somebody that you trust or feel close to, or close enough to express those feelings to, but never shut yourself off completely from the outside world.
Yep. That is, once you shut yourself off, that's just a bad road to go down.
So we'll take those messages today, and hopefully this conversation that we've had today will be a good introduction into talking about the armed forces and the military in America and the rest of the world. So if anybody has a story about their time in the military or armed forces that they'd like to come forward and speak about, whether it was tame or severe in whatever sense of the words that means, it could mean something different to every single person. But I think that, Ryan, today you have given us a good introduction into what a high demand control group looks like inside of the military in terms of restrictions around leisure time, clothing, diet, behavior, relationships, all of those things. And hopefully we can now use this conversation to open up communications about talking about some further restrictions and cult-like methods of control that might be used across the military and armed forces, and see where we can go from here. So thank you so much for joining me today, for telling me your story, for laying it all out there, and paving the way for this communication.
Oh, absolutely. I very much enjoyed it, and I always get a kick allowing people to kind of peek into what the Marine Corps is all about. And of course, if you have any follow up or anyone has any questions, feel free to reach out to me.
Fantastic. Thank you so much, Ryan. I really appreciate your time today, and I hope that you enjoy the rest of your day.
Absolutely. You as well.
Thank you so much. Bye, Ryan.
Bye.
I'm your speaker, Casey, and this has been The Cult Vault.